Welcome to Word Heroes. Please like and subscribe to my channel.
First, let me again try to correct the record on the matter of Kimoy Matsu. I voted for the Formosa Resolution in 1955. I have sustained it since then. I have said that I agree with the administration policy. Mr. Nixon earlier indicated that he would defend Kimoy and Matsu, even if the attack on these islands, 2 miles off the coast of China, were not part of a general attack on Formosa and the Pescadores. I indicated that I would defend those islands if the attack were directed against Pescadores and Formosa, which is part of the Eisenhower policy. I've supported that policy. In the last week, as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I reread the testimony of General Twining, representing the administration in 1959, and the Assistant Secretary of State before the Foreign Relations Committee in 1958, and I have accurately described the administration policy, and I support it wholeheartedly. So that really isn't an issue in this campaign. It isn't an issue with Mr. Nixon, who now says that he also supports the Eisenhower policy. Nor is the question that all Americans want peace and security an issue in this campaign. The question is, are we moving in the direction of peace and security? Is our relative strength growing? Is, as Mr. Nixon says, our prestige at an all-time high, as he said a week ago, and that of the communists at an all-time low? I don't believe it is. I don't believe that our relative strength is increasing. And I say that not as the Democratic standard bearer, but as a citizen of the United States who is concerned about the United States. I look at Cuba, 90 miles off the coast of the United States. In 1957, I was in Havana. I talked to the American ambassador there. He said that he was the second most powerful man in Cuba. And yet, even though Ambassador Smith and Ambassador Gardner, both Republican ambassadors, both warned of Castro, the Marxist influences around Castro, the communist influences around Castro, both of them have testified in the last 6 weeks that in spite of their warnings to the American government, nothing was done. Our security depends upon Latin America. Can any American looking at the situation in Latin America feel contented with what's happening today? When a candidate for the presidency of Brazil feels it necessary to call not on Washington during the campaign, but on Castro and Havana in order to pick up the support of the Castro supporters in Brazil. At the American conference, Inter-American conference this summer, when we wanted them to join together in the denunciation of Castro and the Cuban communists, we couldn't even get the Inter-American group to join together in denouncing Castro. It was rather a vague statement that they finally made. Do you know today that the Russians broadcast 10 times as many programs in Spanish to Latin America as we do? Do you know we don't have a single program sponsored by our government to Cuba to tell them our story, to tell them that we are their friends, that we want them to be free again? Africa is now the emerging area of the world. It contains 25% of all the members of the General Assembly. We didn't even have a Bureau of African Affairs until 1957. In the Africa south of the Sahara, which is the major new section, we have less students from all of Africa in that area studying under government auspices today than from the country of Thailand. If there's one thing Africa needs, it's technical assistance. And yet last year we gave them less than 5% of all the technical assistance funds that we distributed around the world. We relied in the Middle East on the Baghdad Pact. And yet when the Iraqi government was changed, the Baghdad Pact broke down. We relied on the Eisenhower Doctrine for the Middle East, which passed the Senate. There isn't one country in the Middle East that now endorses the Eisenhower Doctrine. We look to Asia, because the struggle is in the underdeveloped world. Which system, communism or freedom, will triumph in the next 5 or 10 years? That's what should concern us. Not the history of 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, but are we doing enough in these areas? What are freedom's chances in those areas? By 1965 or 1970, will there be other Cubas in Latin America? Will Guinea and Ghana, which have now voted with the communists frequently as newly independent countries of Africa, will there be others? Will the Congo go communist? Will other countries? Are we doing enough in that area? And what about Asia? Is India going to win the economic struggle, or is China going to win it? Who will dominate Asia in the next 5 or 10 years? Communism, the Chinese, or will freedom? The question which we have to decide as Americans, are we doing enough today? Is our strength and prestige rising? Do people want to be identified with us? Do they want to follow the United States leadership? I don't think they do enough, and that's what concerns me. In Africa, these countries that have newly joined the United Nations, on the question of admission of Red China, only 2 countries in all of Africa voted with us, Liberia and the Union of South Africa. The rest either abstained or voted against us. More countries in Asia voted against us on that question than voted with us. I believe that this struggle is going to go on, and it may well be decided in the next decade. I have seen Cuba go to the communists. I have seen communist influence and Castro influence rise in Latin America. I have seen us ignore Africa. There are 6 countries in Africa that are members of the United Nations. There isn't a single American diplomatic representative in any of those 6. When Guinea became independent, the Soviet ambassador showed up that very day. We didn't recognize them for 2 months. The American ambassador didn't show up for nearly 8 months. I believe that the world is changing fast, and I don't think this administration has shown the foresight, has shown the knowledge, has been identified with a great fight which these people are waging to be free, to get a better standard of living, to live better. The average income in some of those countries is $25 a year. The communists say, come with us. Look what we've done. And we've been, on the whole, uninterested. I think we're going to have to do better. Mr. Nixon talks about our being the strongest country in the world. I think we are today, but we were far stronger relative to the communists 5 years ago. And what is of great concern is that the balance of power is in danger of moving with them. They made a breakthrough in missiles, and by 1961, 2, and 3, they will be outnumbering us in missiles. I'm not as confident as he is that we will be the strongest military power by 1963. He talks about economic growth as a great indicator for freedom. I agree with it. What we do in this country, the kind of society that we build, that will tell whether freedom will be sustained around the world. And yet in the last 9 months of this year, we've had a drop in our economic growth rather than a gain. We've had the lowest rate of increase of economic growth in the last 9 months of any major industrialized society in the world. I look up and see the Soviet flag on the moon. The fact is that the State Department polls on our prestige and influence around the world have shown such a sharp drop that up till now the State Department has been unwilling to release them. And yet they were polled by the USIA. The point of all this is a struggle in which we're engaged. We want peace. We want freedom. We want security. We want to be stronger. We want freedom to gain. But I don't believe in these changing and revolutionary times, this administration has known that the world is changing, has identified itself with that change. I think the communists have been moving with vigor. Laos, Africa, Cuba, all around the world, they're on the move. I think we have to revitalize our society. I think we have to demonstrate to the people of the world that we're determined in this free country of ours to be first, not first if, not first but, not first when, but first. And when we are strong and when we are first, then freedom gains, then the prospects for peace increase, then the prospects for our security gain.